The quiet man in the corner booth. The restaurant buzzed with soft music, quiet laughter, and the clink of silverware against fine china. Golden chandeliers hung low, casting a warm glow on polished wood and glass. It was a place where expensive perfume floated through the air, and diners wore suits worth a month's wages. But in the farthest booth, near the emergency exit where no one wanted to sit, a man hunched over his table in silence. His coat was thin. Too thin for the cold wind outside. His shoes were scuffed, soles worn through. He held the menu with both hands, not because it was heavy, but because his fingers trembled slightly. Maybe from hunger. Maybe from something deeper. He studied the list of dishes with a kind of quiet panic, like a student reading an exam they hadn't prepared for. The waiter spotted him the moment he walked in. His name was Andrew. He was tall, always well-groomed and proud of the tips he pulled from the high-end clients. Andrew had seen all types, businessmen, influencers, even movie stars. But this man? He was different, didn't belong here. Not with that coat, not with those shoes, and definitely not with that look in his eyes. The kind that spoke of tired days and quiet pain. Andrew approached with a forced smile. "Sir, may I take your order?" But it was laced with something else. Impatience, maybe even mockery. The man looked up, startled. His eyes were soft brown, kind. He offered a weak smile. I'm still deciding," he said gently. His voice was low, but polite. Andrew's smile thinned. "Our kitchen doesn't wait all night. We have other guests, you know." His tone was louder now. Enough for a nearby couple to glance over. The woman frowned. The man chuckled under his breath. The poor man didn't respond right away. He looked back down at the menu. His hand moved slowly to the cheapest soup listed, but before he could speak, Andrew stepped forward. "Look, if you can't afford anything here, maybe this isn't the place for you," he said, just loud enough to echo. The room hushed a little. The man blinked, his lips parted, but no words came. Instead, he nodded slowly, gently closed the menu and placed it on the table. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." He started to rise from the booth, clearly preparing to leave. His pride remained intact, but something behind his eyes cracked. Maybe it was the weight of 1,000 other humiliations before this one. Maybe it was the hunger gnawing at his insides. But whatever it was, it made the moment feel heavy, unbearable. A sharp voice cut through the air. "Sit down." Every head turned. Keanu Reeves stood by the entrance. He wore a plain dark jacket, jeans, and old boots. His hair was tied back. Nothing about him shouted celebrity, but everyone recognized him. His presence alone silenced the room. Andrew's face turned pale. "Mr. Reeves." Keanu ignored him. He walked slowly, eyes locked on the man still half standing in the booth. "I said sit," he repeated, softer this time. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, a gesture of solidarity. The man hesitated, then sat back down, visibly confused. Keanu turned to Andrew. His voice remained calm. "Bring him your best meal, not the cheapest, the best, and don't you dare charge him." Andrew's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His pride hung like a balloon someone had just popped. Behind him, another waiter nearly dropped a tray from sheer disbelief. But sir, he is my guest," Keanu said, sharp now. "You treated him like he was less than human." "I won't forget that." People whispered across tables. Phones came out discreetly. The atmosphere had shifted completely. What started as one man being humiliated had turned into something else. A lesson in dignity. Keanu turned back to the man and slid into the booth across from him. "You looked like you could use a warm meal and a little kindness," he said, softly. "So here I am." The man's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do this for me?" Keanu leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Because someone once did it for me when I had nothing," he said. and it saved my life." The silence in the restaurant was deafening now. People looked down at their plates, some ashamed, some deeply moved. For once, money and fame didn't matter. Only kindness did. But just as the waiter disappeared into the kitchen to prepare the order, another figure walked into the restaurant. A woman, sharp eyes, long coat, and she seemed to be looking for someone. She spotted Keanu, and when she did, her face froze. The man across from Keanu looked up too. His face went white. "No," he whispered under his breath. "Not her." Keanu's eyes narrowed. "Do you know her?" he asked. The man nodded slowly. "She's the reason I ended up on the streets." And with that one sentence, the calm broke, and the real story began. The woman from his past, the moment her heels touched the marble floor, the temperature of the room shifted. The air turned stiff, like every breath might shatter it. She was tall, her steps precise, and she carried herself like someone used to, giving orders and never hearing no. Her coat was expensive, cut from dark navy wool, her earrings tiny diamonds that caught the chandelier light like tiny knives. Every eye in the restaurant moved from Keanu to her, then back again, like they sensed something deeper was unfolding, something personal and painful. Keanu didn't speak at first. He studied her. Not with judgment, but with the careful patience of a man who had seen too much of life to jump to conclusions. The poor man across from him, however, had gone rigid. His fingers trembled slightly against the edge of the table, the soup he never got still absent. His eyes dropped to the tablecloth, as if it might somehow shield him from her gaze. "Do you want to leave?" Keanu asked gently, without looking at the woman. The man shook his head once. "I ran too long. Maybe it's time I faced her, even if I'm not ready." The woman finally approached their booth. She stopped just beside their table and stared at the seated man like he was a bug she'd once stepped on and forgotten about. Her voice, when it came, was smooth, too smooth. "I didn't think I'd find you here. Still hiding in corners, I see." Keanu looked at her without blinking. He wasn't hiding. He was eating, or trying to, before your friend decided to humiliate him. She gave a tight smile, the kind that wasn't warm at all. "You don't know who he is, do you?" "I know enough," Keanu replied. "He was kind, polite, and hungry." "He's a liar," she said sharply. "A thief, a disgrace to our family name. He disappeared years ago after destroying everything." The man looked up now, slowly, painfully. "I didn't destroy anything. You just couldn't stand that I refused your deal. You could have saved the company," she snapped, voice rising now, drawing attention again. "You walked away and left the rest of us to clean up the mess. Your deal would have meant hurting people who trusted us," he said, barely above a whisper. "You wanted me to sign those contracts knowing they'd ruin small vendors, farmers, mothers running shops out of their kitchens. I couldn't be part of that." Keanu leaned forward, voice low and steady. "So he chose people over profit." "He chose poverty," she hissed. "Look at him now, coat falling apart, shoes broken. And what did that honesty get him? Nothing." Keanu turned his gaze to the man. "Did you lose everything because—" "You wouldn't bend your values?" The man nodded. "I lost my home, my friends, even my place at the family table." She made sure of it. For a moment, no one moved. The diners had stopped pretending not to listen. Some looked uncomfortable, others quietly inspired. The waiter who'd insulted the man earlier now stood at the bar, watching with wide eyes. Guilt rested on his face like a stain that wouldn't come off. The woman straightened her coat. "If you're done with your drama, I suggest you leave. I came here for a quiet evening, not a charity circus." Keanu stood now, slow and calm, towering over her. His voice was low, but it echoed in the silence. "You came here to feed yourself, but you've spent the last 5 minutes starving someone else of dignity. Her face twitched. Her mouth opened, but Keanu didn't let her speak. "You see that man?" he said, pointing gently to the one still seated. "He stood up for people when no one was looking, when it cost him everything. That makes him richer than most of the people who'll eat here tonight." The woman turned, fury in her eyes. "You have no idea what you're talking about." But Keanu just smiled gently. "I know enough to recognize real strength when I see it." She stormed away, heels sharp against the floor like gunshots fading into the night. The man sat motionless, a storm behind his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Keanu sat back down, calm as ever. "Don't thank me yet," he said softly. "I think the past just opened a door, and you may need to walk through it." Outside, the wind howled louder. But inside, for the first time in years, the man began to feel something unfamiliar. The faint, fragile flicker of hope until the front door burst open again, and someone else from his past stepped inside. But this time, it was someone he thought had died. The man with the scarred hand. The restaurant's door slammed against the frame as the wind hurled it open, bringing with it a chill that made every napkin flutter and every candle flicker. The warmth that had slowly begun to return to the poor man's face vanished in an instant. His body tensed, his fingers gripped the edge of the table. His eyes, once soft and weary, were now wide with disbelief. A tall man stepped inside, his coat soaked from the rain, boots heavy, leaving a wet trail behind him. He had a thick beard now, darker than before, but his walk hadn't changed. It was the same uneven stride, half confident, half cautious. And on his right hand, a long, jagged scar ran from wrist to knuckle, twisted like a memory that refused to heal. The man at the table didn't speak. Couldn't. He just stared. Even breathing seemed like a task too heavy to carry. Keanu noticed it instantly. He followed the gaze, his own expression sharpening. "Do you know him?" he asked. The poor man nodded slowly, like a machine wound down to its last movement. "He was my best friend," he said at last. "Before the fire, before everything fell apart." Keanu tilted his head, sensing the deeper truth not yet spoken. The tall man scanned the restaurant, water dripping from his sleeves. When his eyes landed on the booth, he froze, not in surprise, not in confusion, but in something worse, recognition laced with regret. He walked forward. Every step sounded like it carried weight not just from his boots, but from years of silence, betrayal, and choices that could never be undone. He stopped beside their table. He didn't greet Keanu. He didn't pretend to smile. "It's really you," he said, voice coarse. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." The poor man leaned back, still stunned. "Last time I saw you, we were standing outside the warehouse, flames behind us. You were shouting at me to run." The man with the scarred hand nodded. "I told you to get out. I stayed back to fix the gas valve, tried to stop the spread. You vanished," the poor man said. "The next day they said you were dead." "I should have been," the man replied. "But I wasn't. Someone found me 2 blocks away, unconscious, face down in the rain." Keanu watched quietly, letting them speak, letting the tension crackle and unfold like a storm on the verge of breaking. "Why didn't you come back?" the poor man asked, voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me you were alive?" "Because I thought you hated me," the other said. "And because I hated myself." Silence fell between them. Not the cold silence of strangers, but the heavy silence of 2 souls carrying the same ghost. The man with the scar looked at Keanu now, like he was finally seeing him. "You're Keanu Reeves," he said. Keanu nodded once. "I'm a guest tonight," he said calmly. "But it seems like fate invited more." The scarred man gave a dry laugh. "You always had a way of showing up where it mattered most," he muttered. Then, turning back to his old friend, his eyes filled with a sadness that had no name, I didn't mean for any of it to happen. Not the fire, not the fallout, not your exile. It wasn't the fire that ruined me, the poor man replied, voice low. It was losing everyone afterward. My sister turned on me. My family shut me out. And you, the one person I trusted most, vanished like I never existed. I was a coward, the scarred man admitted. I thought if I stayed gone, it would hurt less. For both of us. Keanu finally leaned forward. But it didn't, did it? He asked. The scarred man shook his head. No, it ate me alive. Outside, thunder growled in the distance. The city beyond the glass was wet and glowing, as if time itself had slowed down for this reckoning. Keanu looked at them both. You have a choice, he said. You can stay trapped in what broke you, or you can forgive each other and find the pieces worth holding on to. Neither man spoke. Not yet. It was too soon for forgiveness, too soon to rewrite years of pain in one evening. But in that moment, a seed was planted. The scarred man took a hesitant step closer. I'm staying at a shelter 2 blocks from here, he said. If you want to talk, if you think we still have something left to rebuild. The poor man looked at him for a long time, then gave the faintest nod. And as the scarred man turned to leave, Keanu reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded slip of paper, and passed it quietly across the table. What's this? The poor man asked. A name, Keanu said. Someone who helped me once, when I was sleeping in alleys. She runs a center. She doesn't judge, but she listens. I think you should meet her. The man opened the paper, read the name slowly, and looked up with tears in his eyes. Why are you doing all this? Keanu smiled, just a little. Because I know what it feels like to be invisible. And I've learned, when you see someone falling, you don't look away. He leaned back as the waiter finally returned, carrying a tray with steaming food. But just before it reached the table, the restaurant manager rushed in, face pale, holding a document in shaking hands. Mr. Reeves, he said breathlessly, we just received this. There's a legal complaint filed, and your name is on it. Keanu frowned. The man beside him whispered, Please tell me it's not her again. But deep down, they both already knew. The sister wasn't done yet. And this time, she wasn't just here to humiliate. She was here to destroy him completely. The letter of ruin, the manager's hand shook as he placed the folded document on the table, right between Keanu and the man who now looked like he had lost what little piece he'd just begun to reclaim. The paper looked harmless at first, just crisp white, edges perfectly aligned. But the way the manager backed away, like he had just dropped a ticking bomb, said otherwise. Keanu didn't rush. He picked it up carefully, his fingers steady, eyes scanning the text with practiced calm. He had seen contracts, lawsuits, and studio demands. But this wasn't just legal noise. It was personal, ugly, and calculated. The poor man leaned forward, heart pounding in his chest. What does it say? Keanu took a slow breath. It's a defamation suit, he said, voice even. She claims I slandered her character by defending you, that I publicly embarrassed her and damaged her reputation by calling out her treatment of you. The man's face drained of color. She's trying to drag you down, just for helping me. Keanu placed the paper back on the table. This isn't about me. This is about power. She's used to being untouchable. People obey her out of fear, not respect. What I did, what we did, challenged that. The room had grown quiet again. Not out of curiosity this time, but tension. Respect. The diners who had once looked down at the poor man were now watching him differently. And watching Keanu like he was something rare. Something real. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his tone turning colder now. You said she was the reason you ended up on the streets, he said. What happened? All of it. I need to understand. The man swallowed hard. His voice came out dry, raw. It started when I refused to sign her expansion deal. She wanted to partner with a foreign investor who was known for illegal labor practices. I did the research. I brought her proof. But she didn't care. The money was too big. He paused, eyes lost in memory. She said I was weak, that I wasn't fit to lead the family firm. Within a week, she turned everyone against me. Bored. Members, relatives, even my childhood friends. They voted me out, claimed I forged documents. By the time I cleared my name, it was too late. The media had the story she fed them, and I had nothing left. No job, no support, no roof. Keanu listened, his face unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes. Anger, quiet, but fierce. So she destroyed your life, he said. And now she wants to destroy your story, the man nodded. She thinks if she silences you, no one will believe me. Keanu smiled, but not kindly. Then we don't stay silent. Just then, the doors of the restaurant opened again. A different kind of figure entered this time. Not a woman of wealth. Not a man from the past. It was a young girl, no older than 12. Her clothes were simple, her hair wet from the rain, and in her hand she carried something tightly wrapped in a cloth bundle. The hostess rushed toward her. "Excuse me, miss. This is a private establishment." But the girl moved fast, weaving between tables until she stood right at the booth. Her big eyes looked only at the poor man, then at Keanu. "Are you the man who saved my uncle?" she asked softly. The poor man blinked. "Your uncle? He's at the shelter," she said. "He said a man gave him his coat and told him he mattered. That man looked like you." The poor man stared at her, speechless. His throat worked, but no words came out. The girl unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a locket. Old, scratched, but carefully polished. "My uncle wanted you to have this. He said it helped him remember who he was. And now he wants you to have it so you don't forget who you are." She placed it in the poor man's hand, then quickly turned and ran back toward the door before anyone could stop her. Keanu sat back slowly. The poor man held the locket like it was made of glass. Something inside him cracked, softly, beautifully, maybe for the first time in years. But as the warmth of the moment settled, another shadow appeared in the doorway. This one wore a suit. His walk was firm, his eyes sharp, and he carried a briefcase like it was a weapon. He approached their table and opened it without a word, laying out document after document. "I represent Madame Eliza," he said coldly. "She has instructed me to offer a deal. If Mr. Reeves issues a public apology and the gentleman beside him signs a statement retracting all claims, she will withdraw the lawsuit." Keanu didn't flinch. "And if we don't?" he asked quietly. The lawyer stared at him. "She will make sure you never work again." But Keanu's answer came not with anger, just a calm, chilling smile. Then she picked the wrong man to threaten. And somewhere far away, Eliza Reeves checked her phone and saw the video of that night in the restaurant going viral. Every word, every insult, every truth. And her name was the hashtag leading the storm. The storm outside her tower miles away, in a penthouse above the city where glass touched clouds and silence was golden. Eliza Reeves stood by the window, staring at the skyline as her assistant fumbled with the remote. She didn't blink, didn't speak, didn't move, even as her name echoed from the television like a drumbeat growing louder with each passing second. "It's everywhere," her assistant mumbled. "Twitter, news sites, influencers, everyone's reposting the video. They're calling it the night humanity was served on a plate of truth." Eliza turned slowly, her jaw tight. "I own journalists, media outlets. Half the people quoting that clip cash checks with my signature." "Not anymore," the assistant said carefully. "They're stepping back. You've become a liability. That word, liability, hung in the room like a sour smell. Eliza walked over to the screen and watched the footage again. The restaurant. The poor man. Her voice. Her words, like arrows dipped in poison. And then Keanu's calm, unwavering defense. The world wasn't laughing. They weren't mocking. They were listening. "Who recorded it?" she asked. "We don't know. Could have been a guest, a server, maybe even the girl." Eliza paused. "What girl?" "Some kid showed up with a locket. Gave it to the poor man. Said he helped her uncle." That moment got clipped into the video too. Eliza's lips curled into a thin line. Sentiment sells. It always does. But this isn't over. She turned to her desk, pulled, opened a drawer, and took out a folder. Inside was a list of private investigators. "I want to know everything about him. The poor man, where he sleeps, who he talks to, what he had for breakfast. If he has any secrets left, I'll dig them up and bury him with them." Her assistant hesitated. "And Keanu?" Eliza didn't even glance up. "Let him play the savior. Heroes always bleed first in the final act." Back at the restaurant, the air had shifted again. Not tense this time, not heavy, but charged with something more dangerous. Momentum. Keanu sat back with his hands folded, the weight of the moment resting on his shoulders without bending him. Across the table, the poor man stared at the documents the lawyer had left behind. He hadn't touched them, hadn't even blinked in their direction. His eyes were on the locket resting quietly in his palm. Keanu watched him. "You don't have to fight her," he said softly. "You owe no one that pain." The man looked up, his voice clear but quiet. "I think I do." Keanu didn't question it. He simply nodded. "Then I'll stand beside you." The poor man swallowed. "Why? Why do you care this much?" Keanu leaned forward slightly. "Because once, when I was younger and lost, someone saw something in me worth saving. They gave me kindness when I didn't deserve it, and I never forgot that. I've lived my life trying to pass it forward." He paused, then added, "Also, I've spent years playing heroes on screen. It's about time I started acting like one where it matters." The poor man chuckled, a dry, disbelieving sound. "You're nothing like I imagined." "Most people aren't," Keanu said, eyes soft. "They're just waiting for someone to see past the dirt on their face and the cracks in their voice." Just then, a soft chime echoed across the restaurant. It was the front door again. This time, a woman walked in, middle-aged, worn clothes, but her posture carried something strong, dignity carved through hardship. She looked around until her eyes met the poor man's. He froze. "Mama," he whispered. She approached, slow and trembling, then stopped just beside the table. Her eyes shimmered. "I saw the video," she said, "and I cried, because that's the boy I raised. Not the failure they called you. Not the criminal they painted you as." She turned to Keanu. "You gave me my son back." Keanu rose, offered her his seat, and stood quietly while mother and son embraced for the first time in years. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and long overdue, and it made even the servers behind the counter wipe their eyes. As the evening darkened, a phone rang behind the bar. The manager answered, then called out, "Sir, there's a reporter here, from the New York Times. She says she wants to speak to you both." Keanu and the man exchanged a glance. "It's starting," Keanu said. "The fight?" the poor man asked. Keanu nodded. "No, the change." And somewhere, in a shadowed office, Eliza Reeves received an alert. Her firm's biggest investor had just pulled out. Attached was a message with just 3 words. "We believe him." And Eliza's hand, for the first time in years, trembled. The table that changed the city. The interview didn't happen in front of bright cameras or under the buzz of stage lights. It happened at the same booth, hours after most of the restaurant had emptied and the candles had burned low. The New York Times reporter, a woman with quiet eyes and a battered notebook, didn't ask loaded questions or chase headlines. She just listened. The poor man spoke slowly at first, as if afraid his words might crumble mid-sentence. But Keanu sat beside him, calm and steady, and with every memory shared, of the fire, of the betrayal, of his sister's threats, and the long nights on cold benches, his voice grew firmer, stronger. The truth stopped trembling. Keanu didn't speak much. When he did, it was only to fill in the blanks or point to the moments that mattered. The coat handed to a stranger, the quiet dignity of a man who could have lied but chose instead to vanish rather than hurt others. The reporter nodded, scribbled, asked follow-ups. Not once did she interrupt the silence that sometimes filled the space between answers, because those silences were loud. When she finally stood to leave, she turned to them both. This story. It's not about revenge, she said quietly. It's about a system that failed a man who refused to become it, and a stranger who chose not to look away. You'll tell it, right? The poor man asked, not begging, just hoping. I'll tell it true, she promised, and that's more powerful. 3 days later, the article was everywhere. The man in the corner. Booth became a headline shared around the world, but more than the headline, it was the image. A single photo taken from a bystander's phone where the poor man sat across from Keanu Reeves, holding a worn locket in one hand and a napkin in the other, tears falling quietly. Beneath the photo, a quote in bold, "We rise by lifting others." Within a week, the shelter near the restaurant received donations enough to expand its beds and food programs. The girl with the locket was found, and a full scholarship was anonymously gifted to her name. Businesses once owned by the poor man's. Family began pulling away from Eliza Reeves's firm, one after another, not out of anger, but principle, and Eliza herself. Her empire didn't crumble overnight. Empires rarely do, but cracks formed, wide and visible. Board members resigned, investors disappeared, and soon, her name wasn't feared anymore. It was questioned, and that, for someone like her, was the deepest cut. She tried to issue a statement, tried to sue the paper, but no one cared. Truth had moved on without her. On a quiet morning, the poor man walked into the same restaurant again. Not in rags, not out of hunger, but because he had something to return. He carried a small envelope and approached the manager, who stiffened at the sight of him. "You don't owe me anything," the manager said, ashamed. The man smiled. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to pay for the soup I never got that night." The manager laughed softly. "It's on the house, forever." He left the envelope anyway. Inside it was a note. "For the next man who comes in hungry, see him." And taped beside the register that day, where all customers could see, was a new sign written in bold black letters. "No one eats alone." For Keanu, he disappeared for a while after that. No press tour, no statement, just gone. But rumors grew. A man matching his description was spotted helping rebuild a burned shelter on the edge of town. Another sighting placed him in a hospital's children's ward, sitting beside kids with no visitors. No one could confirm it. No one needed to, because sometimes the kindest acts leave no spotlight. They just leave better people behind. And one rainy evening. Months later, the poor man returned to the booth one last time. He wasn't poor anymore. Not in pocket, but more importantly, not in spirit. He had found work, peace, and the beginnings of forgiveness. He sat quietly, and for a brief second, he thought he saw someone across the room. A familiar figure in a dark jacket, sipping coffee alone, eyes kind, posture relaxed. But when he looked again, the booth was empty. Still he smiled, because he knew. Some people don't need to stay to leave something lasting. They just need to walk in, once, and change everything.